equal spin. The propaganda's a win, stress feeding on my tension. My countrymen, they love their fiction. Words are now, it's made with good intentions.
Welcome to 1 or 200, the New Zealand International Media Politics podcast. You're here again for another week of current events. We have me. My name's Philip. Hello, nice to meet you. Welcome back. We appreciate your many hours of pained listening to our random squabbles and thoughts. We also have Stephanie. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm good. Also, I try to be funny sometimes.
Oh, okay.
It's not all doom and gloom, Philip. Don't set us off on the wrong foot, man.
It's true. I just wanted to leave a pregnant pause for listeners to make their own decisions.
Is that a pregnant person pause?
Oof, yeah. These days, you can't even leave pregnant pauses without some politically correct brigade jumping down your throat. We also have Simone. How are you doing, Simone?
Everything that I say is serious and legally actionable. Write to kyle.church at...
That's right. Do that. Take it seriously. That's not his email, but do write to that account. I feel sorry for whoever has that Gmail address because they've received a number of hate emails over the years, I'm certain.
If you don't like what I'm saying, I would like you to know you can sue Kyle.
Leave that in.
I'm doing okay. I was out, as I was saying, I was desperately trying to get, like, I'm glad this is an audio medium, not a visual one, because I've still got, like, I'm trying to get eyeliner off and I just can't, because I was out last night. And weirdly, and I suppose this shouldn't be weirdly because it was the Auckland Writers Festival, there were a lot of people who I was kind of mixing in with, where I was talking about, oh, I need blah, blah, blah. Oh, Kyle, oh, yeah. And they're like, oh, you're a 1 of 200 person. And I was like, why does people know what that is? That's weird. This is real life.
It is weird. Still, 7 years later, meeting people who say, oh, Philip from 1 of 200. And I go, oof, is that good or bad?
Like, no, that's another guy. I didn't do any of that.
Yeah. Let's go with no until you tell me more about your politics, and then we can discuss if I'm that person or not, right? Okay. Look, we've got a few topics on the docket today, potentially, but really I just want to kick us off with a bit of a kind of meandering thought spree through the changes to pay equity, because I think that's going to take us kind of in many different directions, and I'm curious to see where it goes. So as everyone I'm sure listening to this podcast will know, there's been the back down, or more accurately maybe called a kind of aggressive regression in pay equity abilities for these claimants to go through. And I thought I might, if it's okay with you both, go through a quick list of the 33 claims that have been summarily cancelled retrospectively under urgency, which, if you care about due process, is already quite bad. But I think it's useful to kind of start off with a grounded understanding of who we're actually talking about here directly. Okay, 33 claims. So gird your ears. We have teachers, primary school and ECE funded sector, support workers, youth workers in residential schools, education services, education advisors, learning support at the MOE, psychologists at MOE employed, service managers, MOE employed, kindergarten administration, kindergarten cooks, kindergarten teacher aides, early learning teachers, kohanga reo, kayako, tertiary education library assistants, tertiary education administration and clerical, public service administration and clerical, ×2, corrections psychologists, corrections probation officers and senior practitioners, social service workers at 5 NGOs, primary practice nurses and healthcare assistants, CSWs 1, 2, and 3. Oh, that's community support workers, right? Frontline managers and coordinators, plunket administration and clerical, plunket nurses and clinical, community midwives and primary birthing units, hospice nurses and healthcare assistants, nurse practitioners, primary care administration, primary care nurses, access community nurses, lab tests awanui, nurses in residential care, NZ artificial limb service, and sexual wellbeing Aotearoa, and librarians and librarian assistants in councils. So it's a pretty broad and deep kind of swath of New Zealand that we're talking about here, hundreds of thousands of people, and very directly hit in their back pocket by this transfer of wealth, and pretty quickly and kind of unexpectedly rammed through. So obviously cancelling those current claims was pretty devastating. retrospective, rushed under urgency, and the thresholds were changed and made the claims more difficult to make again. So they can say all they like that you can come back and do the claim again, but A, these things have been in the works for literally years, and B, the thresholds become more difficult, so some of these industries will no longer be possible for these people to have their claims addressed. I think we can get a bit into kind of the comparison matrices and, how that was intended to work. I'm definitely curious to hear Stephanie's take on what worked and what she didn't think would work from that original kind of proposal. And there's also some stuff I'm keen to get into about the intra politics of this coalition. Obviously, actors kind of excited about this and jumping, and Brooke Van Velden is, stamping on the necks of the marginalised women with glee. New Zealand First being conspicuously silent, and National kind of posting through it in the most embarrassing way possible. Yeah, so let's kick off. Saving $17 billion, Stephanie. How can that be bad?
Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. I'm going to start with the Terry Pratchett reference because in the first Tiffany A. King book, The We Free Men, she talks about her little brother Wentworth and how when he has too many lollies in front of him, sometimes the only thing to do is stick a bucket on his head until he's calmed down and can figure out which of the lollies he would like to take first, so he's not just trying to take all the lollies at once. That is how I feel about things I'm angry about with regard to this decision. So I think let's start with the money. The idea is this is saving 17 billion. Brooke Van Velden said this was about saving money. Christopher Luxon then said it's not about saving money. I am Chitty from The Good Place saying, you get how that makes it worse, right? Like that just means you don't want women and people in women-dominated industries to be paid fairly. That if you just said it was about the savings, you'd sound slightly better. When Brooke Van Velden is sounding like the lesser of two evils, you are in trouble, Christopher Luxon. But I think there's also an important perspective to keep in mind, which is that it might be 17 billion across those pay equity claims that were currently in the works, but that's also representing decades, even centuries of work that is done by women, work that is predominantly care-based, work that is seen as feminized or less skilled because it's caring focused or emotionally intelligent or requires more psychological skills than hard manual labor skills. That's years of these workforces being systemically underpaid. So the reason it sounds like a lot, 17 billion, is because we're trying to play catch up with patriarchy. And I just don't think it can be emphasized enough that, yes, our nurses and teachers and midwives and librarians are now going to be paying the price, but they've been paying the price. They've been doing the job despite it being repeatedly, consistently, systemically undervalued. And there's been another point raised, which is so many of these claims are in the public sector, and it's kind of an obvious point. Yeah, a lot of these roles are public roles because we understand as a society that you can't leave this shit to the private sector because it's too important. We can't just free hand of the market, invisible hand of the market, free market. Oh God, the jargon is getting to me. It's too early on a Saturday, but we can't leave these roles up to the private sector because they will strip mine them for parts and not actually deliver the vital caring services that human beings need to survive. So yeah, government's got to cough up for years and years of patriarchal, misogynist suppression of these vital roles. So in terms of the actual comparator matrix and stuff, I remember, and this may tag me as a little bit radical, but I remember I was working at the PSA, I think, when the pay equity principles were first sorted out between employer associations, unions, and the government. And this was heralded as a huge thing. And I was sitting there being a little bit like, why don't we just have a general strike about it? Saying, why are we celebrating having principles settled? And what I was told, and what I can see as in a normal world where you don't have Brooke Van Velden as Minister of Workplace Relations, it's a good strategy. Let's do the tripartite thing. Let's find the system that is the most agreeable to all the parties so that it's not a constant bun fight and you're not scrapping over every single thing. Let's have a consistent system so everyone's operating by the same rules and everyone's agreed to the same standards of practice. Well, what we're now seeing is that when you do get Brooke Van Velden as Minister of Workplace Relations and you do get Christopher Luxon as your Prime Minister, none of that matters anymore. So I say, guys, comrades, next time, let's just smashing pay the nurses and teachers and midwives and librarians more and tax the rich to pay for it. Come on. But in terms of the actual details of the Matrix, obviously Brooke Van Velden's had her quote about, we're comparing social workers to air traffic controllers. And it just is bleakly funny how much that proves the point. Like, that we're instinctively meant to go, oh, yes, air traffic control is a very serious, very skilled role. And social work, what even is that? When the reality is you have to train for a lot longer to be a social worker, to be paid a lot less. Air traffic controllers are also vital. I will note that National and ACT are happy to slag them off when they want to complain about mandatory rest breaks at work, because air traffic control is one of those jobs where, yeah, you need to take your rest breaks when they're scheduled. But we're meant to see that as being a skilled and important and valuable intellectual job, not a social work role, which is just, telling the kids to get back to school or whatever. But it also highlights why the matrix we had, the comparators we were using, had to be things outside the relevant industry, because the whole point is that caring work, by which I mean everything that feels fluffy and cuddly and isn't learning which button to press on a big machine, all of those industries are framed and codified as being women's work, soft skill work, less skilled work. So you can't find good examples in education of male dominated roles being paid more than women dominated roles, because those whole industries, except for being a principal, because that's a boss job, so men can do that one, the whole industry is framed as feminine and paid less as a result. So I guess what I'm just getting to is, of course, this was going to be a big deal because it was an attempt to rebalance the scales, which have been balanced against these crucial workforces for their entire existence. And for this government to just turn around and go, nah, and to not even have a pretty good reason why, because everyone, every economist, every member of the press gallery immediately went, that 17 billion is just a little bit more than the amount you gave as tax cuts to landlords. That's weird. I am truly surprised at how bad a move this is by them. And I really think they've massively underestimated the backlash they're going to get. And we're already seeing that. There were already massive protests outside ministers' offices and MPs' offices. There's already been really strong union mobilization. And I don't know what else to say. I'm sure I have more things to say, but I'm so mad. I'm so mad about it. And I just hope that we on the left can take this as a bit of a boost to just be more radical and strong when we have the next left-wing led government, whether that's a Labour-led government or, fingers crossed, a Green Party, Te Pāti Māori joint coalition, to just do the thing, massively increase the pay, pick up these cases where they were left off, because, years of work has gone into them. There's so much analysis, there's so much process that has been done, that I think, honestly, the next Minister of Workplace Relations should just go, I'm just going to approve all of those. We're going to make it happen, and we're going to figure out how to pay for it afterwards, because the benefits for our communities and our entire country will be so huge in comparison to the monetary cost. Here endeth Stephanie's first rant about pay equity for the day.
Just a quick question. Is it like politically good if you piss off approximately 50% of the population? Is that like a good thing for your prospects? I'm not like a smooth political operator. I don't know this. Philip, perhaps you could help us.
I can, as a centrist, naturally, this is my wheelhouse. Yes, surprisingly, it's really good if you're Brooke Van Velden representing a party who only men vote for. This is as in America, they say the crosstabs, like women don't vote ACT. Statistically, that is a negligible amount of people. And all the women who vote ACT are millionaire homeowners. So, look, for them, it is a genuine political win. Will it result in any kind of electoral boost? I don't think so, because there are only so many sociopathic women who own houses above the ages of kind of 55, and they all vote ACT already. So, good luck. But yeah, it is wild to me, the political, I don't even want to say naivete, but inability that National's shown in this move, because as Stephanie was saying, like, it is really, like, it's more than shooting themselves in the foot. It's shooting themselves in in the stomach. Like it's going to be a bleeding wound for the rest of their term. And I don't know how they get around this. Like, multiple national voting and national supporting and high profile kind of liberal Nats when that was a thing, like the Nikki K strand of the party, that entire kind of faction who aren't in parliament are all railing against this. Which is, I don't know if that's surprising or not. I think Stephanie's really hit on something that it's like it gets to the strand of economic parochial patriarchy that we maybe hoped that we were past as a country over the last 10 years. But I don't know. It is surprising if you look beyond the direct kind of gender economics of this and go, well, I mean, this is essentially neoliberalism, right? Like you've bought into a sector of the market that traditionally has low pay. Simply make a more rational choice. Like, if you wanted to make money, why did you become a librarian or a care worker or, a community support worker or, Lord forbid, something that actually saves the lives of old and underserved people, right? Like if you genuinely thought the free market and the invisible hand was gonna, pave the way to heaven, then why are you crying about it now, right? But I think this shows there's something deeper to our democracy than that. And there's, as the Australians say, like the beating heart of social democracy like won't go away because there's an inherent kind of fairness and values driven argument that's going on from the Janet Wilsons and the press pack and the sensible centrists who seem to think they normally have a handle on this stuff and probably were involved in the Todd Muller coup somehow. So look, I do think it's interesting how much they've fumbled the bag. And what do you think, Simone? I do find it like genuinely quite baffling.
I was just thinking when you started, as a centrist, Philip is going to become bigender. So I just thought it was really funny that yeah, it seems like that they have shot themselves in the stomach. But I don't know. Perhaps this is too cynical. But I sometimes think that the political memory of the press and by extension New Zealanders who sort of rely on the agenda setting press in order to make sense of the world have such a short memory. It's one where this could well be forgotten by the next election. And it could be something that Labour hasn't picked up on or attempted to try to push back against. So I don't know. It's impossible to predict these things, but I think it really relies upon people outside of the news taking a hold of this. And I think Stephanie touched on that really well in saying this is a good opportunity for the left. The torch needs to be picked up and taken with it because you strike while the iron's hot. The news will move on. The cycle will move on. But while people are fired up about this is a good opportunity to be able to take further action for that and show them why hammering out the principles was a compromise position that benefited them because this is going to be worse for them. So you are unmuted, Stephanie. Did you want to talk?
Yeah, sorry. I've talked,
Okay.
I've done my quota, but I just wanted to say, to speak to your point about political memory, I think that's one of the things that's really fucked National on this. And I think you're right, Philip. Like for ACT, this is pure win. This is haha, look at us flexing our big muscles and being influential, and Christopher Luxon's government being unable to do anything to protect their own hides because this is really bad for them. But part of the issue, I think, is that the Equal Pay Amendment Act they've repealed is so new. It was 2020. So as soon as within hours of this being announced, I was already seeing videos on TikTok where people had compiled the live Hansard video of Nicola Willis and a whole bunch of other National Party cabinet ministers, the people who are overseeing this decision, who are going to be announcing this budget next week, all talking about how great this law was. I think if there's an alternate universe where Brooke Van Velden gives a shit about National's voter base and makes it more about we're going to repeal the 1972 Equal Pay Act because it's 50 years old, it's no longer fit for purpose. The scheme we currently have is a band-aid over some systemic problems. And you could do this serious, you could see a National Party minister with your kind of Chris Finlayson type of gravitas doing that. Well, we just need to reset the settings because they're no longer fit for purpose. But you're talking about a bill that's 5 years old. So of course it's not just National supported this, it's you guys. You guys literally supported this. Like David Seymour was in Parliament at the time. He was at least smart enough not to take a call on the bill, so I don't think there's any footage of him talking to it. That was when he was still a Lone Ranger. in those blessed days when ACT was simply a joke party trying to create an overhang. But it's I think that's what's making this backlash so quick and so powerful, because you can't just say we're repealing something that's like when Simon Bridges tried to go for the Employment Relations Act and was able to be like, well, we're just tweaking at the edges, we're not doing anything too drastic. This is like you've repealed something that's 5 years old, you've cancelled more than 30 claims that were underway retrospectively, things that have taken years. And a point I didn't get to, but it's not just affecting these workforces, these are the most trusted groups of workers in the country. Every time where you do one of those surveys, which profession do you trust the most? Nurses, teachers, librarians. These are the most beloved people. It's why I've said this before on the pod, but this is why ACT and occasionally National gets so angry about teacher unions, because they have to make you think that teacher unions or nurses unions are different from the teachers and nurses who you instinctively love and trust, because that's just a foundational part of our community. So yeah, I think it's too short a period to the next election for people to really have forgotten this. And because I think we're going to have more, I'm not sure which collectives expire between now and the election, but I'm sure that if PPTA or NZEI or NZNO have got their ducks in a row, they have everything kind of expiring mid 2026. So I think that this is going to possibly be the thing that kills this government. And I know we all had our daydreams that it would be Winston Peters throwing a temper tantrum and calling a snap election. And I'd love that to happen too. But this feels like way more, as you say, Philip, of a gut shot to the government.
Winston Peters, you keep saying, what is a woman? Stand up for women, baby. Call a snap election.
Yeah, I mean,
No.
there was that like slightly cringe, but from a Labour perspective, pretty good moment where Winston Peters thought he had his kind of culture war swerve by saying, "What is a woman?" in response to a question, and Chris Hipkins said, "Do you define a woman as someone who earns less than a man?" Which is pretty good by
That
Labour.
was a great quip.
Right?
Hipkins is good on his feet.
He is good on his feet. He needs to be more of a bulldog, as we've always said. Yeah, like okay, provocative question number one. I have kind of three questions.
Ooh.
Provocative is too
test.
strong a word.
I like where this is going.
Not a test. All right, chill out, chill out.
It's a girlfriend quiz. I'm all bees.
Oh.
Would you still vote for me if I were a worm?
That goes out to the 0.5% of our listeners who are as online as Simone.
Yeah, I have BPD, beautiful princess disorder.
Okay, no, I wanted look, I wanted to ask how should leftists and even the centre left kind of push back on this in terms of like both structurally and comsively, because I've seen a few different kind of paths already, right? There's what don't let my words infect your thinking, but I would describe as kind of the easy mode where you go, look, even Janet Wilson thinks it's bad, therefore, it's bad because this is so, even for the National Party, this is evil or cruel, or they're the nasty party again, right? How many times has Labour tried that in the last 30 years, 25 years? But I don't know, like that doesn't feel like enough to me because it doesn't change the tenor of the conversation. It doesn't actually get to the structure of what's going on, right? That's how, as Simone implied, I think accurately, like that's how you lose the messaging and you get behind because, next 24-hour news cycle, there'll be some other scandal and who knows what it'll be. But like, I do think there's a way to get this to the actual kind of power dynamics and the structure that applies like politically, economically between these parties. And it's by going to something that Stephanie was saying before, like it's more of an ongoing danger, I think, because you say, look, you have transferred this money between this sector and this sector. And you actually shouldn't be surprised because that's who you stand for. Like, if you're a landlord or a multimillionaire, of course, that's who they vote for. And I think that is the kind of thing that could really hurt the mythical swing voters, the netball mums, and the New Zealand First voters. Like, women vote for New Zealand First, right? That's another factor. Low-income women vote for New Zealand Firsts. And in 6 months, when the polling, inshallah, has gone terribly for this government, that's when Winston Peters goes, I was tricked into this. I never saw the cabinet papers in the same way as he did last time under Jacinda. I actually didn't know what was going on. I was asleep at the time. I was drunk. and that's a good thing. So we should
I
have
mean, we
it.
know that Winston Peters.
We know. Yeah. So look, how do you think we should push back? Because I personally thought Jag was really good. Julianne Genter, I've had my criticisms of her in the past, but I thought her speech was really, really good. Like solid social democracy, dropping the N-word, neoliberalism, like consistently, and like aggressive in I think the exact right kind of way, and hitting the details. And I was impressed. And like it takes me a lot to be impressed by the Greens these days as a former comrade and now cynic of the party in general. But I thought she really killed it and had some like incredibly on the nose kind of quotes about it's not just about women, it's about hurting people who don't have enough. Like I thought that was really good because I mean, this is easy to turn into a purely kind of gender economics issue, and obviously that's the headline, right? But 30% plus of people in these industries aren't women, and that's a hell of a lot of people. Like I've been into plenty of daycare centers and nurse centers and spoken to enough community support workers that if you're a man in those industries, you want to be alive, right? And you have friends and you have social networks, and people know that you're struggling. And these people have families and they have people who support, like, rely on them. And if your grandparent is in a care home and their support worker is struggling to live, they know that, right? That ripples out and has effect across the community. So I think there is like a more kind of broad, I guess, capital D democratic kind of way of fighting back on this, a more populist, standing up for everyone who needs it kind of approach. But I don't know, and also I think the unions have taken like slightly divergent routes. Some of them are being more aggressive or more, what did you expect? Don't vote for this government, and and some of them have been more maybe conciliatory. I don't know. What do you think, Stephanie? I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Well, I'm always the framing and comms person, so that's where my heart lives. I think it's about for our political parties, it is maintaining that energy, it's maintaining that anger, it's being righteous about this. It is not doing, and so I'm gonna compliment sandwich this. Jantonetti did a real great speech on this. Angry, fiery, asking why women on the National Party front bench weren't hanging their heads in shame. Spicy, do more of it. It's maintaining that energy and not giving into the Hipkins bureaucratic smarm, like not being all, well, we would respect the process. We cannot make this a process thing. We cannot make this a quibbling about the details thing. And I don't think it's enough to just say we would reinstate the law as it was. I already saw some centrists on Blue Sky saying, well, it's actually just not that easy because they've repealed something. So how would you? It's like you copy paste it and you put the bill back in under urgency in your first 100 days, guys. Can we just learn like one thing about how to exercise power from the right for once? But I think it's about having that really strong message about what do we value? Like what is actually important? This is one of those critical opportunities to get people to understand that economic data doesn't mean shit if people aren't able to pay the bills and if people aren't getting fairly paid for the critical work they do. It's an opportunity to really hammer that we don't just respect teachers and nurses and librarians and midwives because it's so lovely of them to do this work. We do it because it is vital work for human existence, that having good healthcare, having good primary healthcare, having good education, having people doing these jobs because they love them is great, but that's not enough. That's not the end point. We have to understand that capitalist society, money can be exchanged for goods and services. Those people need to be earning fair wages, and just hammering that over and over, and hopefully going into the election, this is to the political parties with strong, clear policies, whether it is we will reinstate the deals as the claims as they were at the point of repeal, or we will just do a blanket X% pay increase. The left don't all have to have the same ideas on this. Labour could come up with something, Greens could come up with something, Te Pāti Māori could come up with something, and then MMP, you find the compromise solution that works for everyone. But we need to maintain this energy. We need to also appreciate and celebrate the fact that at a moment's notice, we can get rallies in front of every minister's electorate office, making noise and creating a huge fuss, and outside Parliament on loudhailers doing amazing chanting. Like, this is the best time I can see us having in this political term to realize what good progressive political power looks like and to buckle down on that. And please, please, Christopher Hipkins, I know, I give you so much shit. I'm not sorry, but this one time, I'm sorry. Please, please be the sassy, blokey bulldog that you can be and just keep taking it to them on that level because that is how you become prime minister again, Chris. I believe in you.
Say that everybody who is going to strike will be reimbursed by the government the moment you get in power. Just like tell them that you've got their back. Do you know what I mean? Like, I know you can like it's easy to call, like, say, oh, we're calling for a general strike or something like that. And I think that that sort of thing, we're not at a point where that's feasible in New Zealand. And in fact, the unionized workforce in this country, the density of it is not as high as it should be. But for the love of God, like, there are so few people who have the means and ability to outlast this kind of action that needs to be done. As Labour, you need to say, like, we are gonna reinstate this, so like you will get your pay equity claims. We're gonna put them through, exactly what Stephanie said. And also, if you take action over this, we will support you to the hilt. You will have that back. Do you know what I mean? And you also make it, and then you say we're going to actually overhaul the industrial relations in this country so that this can never happen again. We're not doing the ERA. You know, we're going back to actually having proper union protections in this country. We are going to ratify the rest of the International Labour Organization's code, and we're going to make it so that we're compliant. You know, we're going to make it so that you're able to take meaningful industrial action in this country, to undertake solidarity strikes, to be able to improve your lives so that you don't have to wait for the government's largesse to do it. You don't have to wait, 3, 6, 9 years to get a little bit of relief from a Labour government that's going to give you just those little crumbs. I'm not saying that you have to do it, but you should. I mean, you'd be stupid not to. But say it, right? And mean it, at least at the time. And then do it. Please actually do it.
That's fantastic. That's like, can you imagine a Labour Party that stood up for Labour? I know this is a bit hack at this point, but
Imagine a Labour Party.
yeah, I know. Americans, imagine a burger. New Zealanders, imagine a Labour Party. Yeah, there's a certain amount of like that would actually be material support, right? I've never heard embarrassingly old, and I've never heard the Labour Party say anything even close to as radical as that, right? I can't imagine any current MPs in the Labour Party standing up and saying, look, we're the Labour Party. We stand up for workers, especially workers who have been downtrodden for decades and centuries, as Stephanie rightly mentioned. If this isn't the right time to stand up, then what the hell is, right? This is why we're here. This is our raison d'être. I'm sure they would use a French term to describe a New Zealand phenomenon. And then they would say, if you have your pay docked, if you get fired, if you get in any way damaged for standing up for what's right when it comes to such a basic foundational attack on your human rights, we will make you whole. And that's our role as a political party that stands up for Labour and stands for Labour and everything that represents. But there's no one in the current political sphere in New Zealand with power who will stand up and say that, right? But you're right, Simone. I think that would be a real kind of signal of a changing of the guard, and like that is an actual fight back.
Vote us in. We're going for full employment. And guess what? Even if you're not employed, you don't have to fear losing your job because we're raising benefits to livable levels. How easy is that? How easy is that? Just do it. I don't understand why they wouldn't. I mean, I understand why they wouldn't. Like, look, these social democrats love, Norway and Sweden because they're white countries, or they're perceived to be white countries, and, they're social democrats. But you could point to those countries and be like, look at what the Scandies do. New Zealand is of comparable size. Why are we not able to do this sort of thing? Don't look too far into it, because those countries have also had neoliberal turns and also have a huge problem with racism against refugees. But, in general, if you were to take that sort of pitch to New Zealanders, what they believe those countries to be, you could, I don't even want to say sell this. I don't think that this is a marketing thing. You can build this. It's not a product. This is your life and your labor and your blood and your sweat and your tears. This is, even if this isn't you, this is your mother, this is your sister, this is somebody else who grew up with at school, right? Like, how is this so difficult for them to understand?
Mhm.
It's political. Look, it's a political wound for National. You can turn it into political suicide. You can end the National Party over this. Okay, I shouldn't have said that because then they won't do it because they don't want that. But it's for at least a little while. Chris Hipkins, you love the big boy chair. You're a little boy who really wants to be sitting in the big boy throne. You've always wanted it. You've never had a real job. You want to sit in it again. 9 years, 12 years. I promise you, you'll get that big boy. They'll make the big boy chair bigger. They're gonna make it bigger for you. You're gonna look so small, sitting high up in that thing, dangling your legs. I promise you.
Oh, the little swinging Hipkins toes is an image I won't get out of my head for the next few days. Thank you, Simone.
It's little chippies out.
Oh no.
Opening a little packet of chippies for Chipkins.
I'm just going to completely swerve off topic here because there are disturbing images in my head. But I do I'm sorry, Philip, but as a Green Party current hack, I do feel compelled to point out that the Greens did just like announce a Greens job guarantee and a Ministry of Green Works, and there's going to be a alternative budget announcement, which will be really interesting. I guess my
It was
now I
very good.
say that
It was
my one concern is that all of this equal pay shenanigans has happened too close to the actual budget for the Greens to incorporate a strong, well-costed response to it in their alternative budget. But I believe in you, policy team. I believe in you. I love you guys. Yeah, just I think Simone is right that this has the potential to be the end of the National Party, at least as we know it, because it is such this term has been nothing but a series of examples of Christopher Luxon being completely unable to push back against the two most clownish men in New Zealand politics. And he's got this horrifically conservative, evangelical, tradcath faction who want to do the things that the two most clownish men in New Zealand politics want to do. And then he does have the Nicolas Willis and the Chris's Bishop, who may not be in quite at the Nikki K end of the party, but do perceive themselves to be these sensible, classical liberal, fiscally conservative, but socially progressive people. And they're just getting humiliated every single time. And Nicola Willis, in particular, is the Minister of Finance and is completely incapable, apparently, of providing any kind of pushback or resistance to this kind of stuff. And I hate to be biased towards a girl boss, but I choose to believe that she would probably, if Luxon weren't like, no, you can't, because I want to sit in the big boy chair for a bit longer. But this budget is the budget where ministers of finance really get to actually like make their mark and set their legacy, because it's not a we can blame everything on the last crew budget that you get in your first year, and it's not the how are we trying to sneak through bribes to our voter base budget of an election year. And now hers will be completely dominated by you screwed over teachers and nurses and librarians in order to give landlords tax cuts, and you cancelled Dunedin Hospital, and you cancelled the ferries, and that was just completely shambolic and embarrassing. But also Judith Collins gets billions of dollars to spend on shooty bang bangs. What kind of sensible fiscal management is that, Nicola? Now, to be clear, I don't give a damn about sensible fiscal management because that's not how government budgets should work. But that is a core value for National Party governments. And Brooke Van Velden has like done the massive blow to the base of the pillar, but it's been chipped away since the election.
yeah,
And
I mean, at the
what do they
very
do?
it's an aesthetic value that they uphold, right? It's not materially, it's not. And Labour Party hacks, the Smiths and the Neils of this world love to go on about the fact that like actually Labour Party is the one that does macroeconomics, TM, and it becomes pretty wearing because how many votes is that swayed? Like seven. And Janet Wilson knows them all personally and invites them to dinner. And it's not a big deal, but Yeah, this is why I was excited to get you on tonight, Stephanie. As I said before our before the podcast started, I've decided that you're our resident Willis whisperer,
I,
and
I just don't know how
I love
comfortable
it.
I am with that.
I love it. Look, none of us can can speak Nicola Willis as well as you, and I appreciate that. Yeah. So, what do you think in terms of? There's obviously some personnel, like you say, in what you think in her heart of hearts, Willis wouldn't be doing this. Is that what you think?
Pop psychoanalyzing someone
Yeah.
who the depth of our relationship is that we both ran an Oh How Do You last time. And
Yeah,
so
best
we
friends
went to,
forever.
look, we went to many candidate meetings and we shared many a sideways glance at each other as Greg O'Connor shouted about how if it weren't for the Labour government, everyone in this room would be dead of COVID, because he is a diplomatic and refined man. But I wouldn't say that she wouldn't have done it. I think she would have done it in more of that slightly greasy John Key kind of way. As I said, the kind of, well, we really need to look at these settings. I feel that, and God, do they not have any competent comm staff? I'm just going to sidebar. They put a graphic up on their social media that says equal pay is not being scrapped. And I'm like, guys, rule one of political comms is you don't negate a sentence. Now all people see is equal pay scrapped. The human brain is not reading that whole sentence. It's the Nixon I am not a crook thing. But also there is a smarmy, awful way to do this that John Key would have gotten away with, which is to be like, well, obviously we supported this bill when it came in because we thought that it would really provide a sensible framework, but now we can see that it's just too much and we're not sure that the settings are right. And yeah, I think they would have done it in a way that was a bit less just vulgar. I think that's probably the word I'm looking for, because that's the way a lot of the ACT Party stuff has been. It's just they are angry toddlers who are getting their way and have stolen a doll from another kid at kindy and are being incredibly smug and smarmy about it, and nobody likes that look. And it really cuts into National's aesthetics of being the sensible managerial, we're the party that wears nice suits and all have experience in business, even though a lot of them have exactly the same career path as Christopher Hipkins. So let's just park that idea. But I don't think she would have done some of the really dumb shit that's happened. I think a lot of the situation she's now in, that she chooses to be in because she chooses to remain Minister of Finance under Christopher Luxon's premiership. But a lot of the stuff like just cancelling all of the agreements or the claims that were underway on day one under urgency, there are so many smarter ways to do that. I think she probably doesn't want to give Judith Collins $9 billion or whatever for shooty bang bangs. And I will always say I'll say two good things about Nicola Willis. She has okay taste in board games, and also I do not believe that it was her idea to cancel the Inter-Islander ferry contract by text message. That is a screamingly Christopher Luxon move. And so she's now in this situation of her own choice, because she is choosing to remain as Minister of Finance, where there's no good news for her. And the best I think she can probably do, and here's one of these times I make a prediction. I'm really worried because I hate making predictions, because if they're wrong, then people message me for years afterwards about it. She's going to try to sell this budget as sensible and restrained. And there are just too many big numbers in the headlines for that to work as a narrative. And God knows she wants to be Prime Minister, so she's got to hang on in there. But Christopher Luxon may just be screwing every last chance she has of ever being Prime Minister, because, I mean, clearly he's not a man who's going to go until he's pushed. And she probably can't push him with the dominance of the scary evangelicals who won't accept a woman leader in their caucus at the moment.
Yeah, interesting. Thanks for your armchair psychoanalyzing. I
My
appreciate it.
completely uninformed views. You are welcome.
No, with a PhD in Willisology, I think we all need to listen to you.
I am not a doctor of Willisnomics. I'm not taking that.
Well,
I just am thinking. I know this that it's about the substance, but I keep thinking about the public law aspect of this. And I suppose, I mean, maybe we could talk about the reality of that and say, well, if National can do this, why can't Labour? Do all of this sort of stuff. They've opened the floodgates. But I just keep thinking back to the last Labour term, where there were constitutional lawyers coming out left and right and saying, if you dare to entrench Three Waters, it would be a scandal. And it was like the way that National did this was in total violation of the rule of law and of the constitutional norms of this country. Firstly, doing something substantive and not emergency based under urgency, unlike the pandemic response, right? Which is a good example. Or if you have an earthquake response and there's a legislative need to do so, that's what urgency is for. Not for this. Never for anything like this. The other is, and I think this is the more egregious component, having passed it under urgency so that it has retrospective effect for agreements which we're going to go through. Now, the reason why we don't do that, even on a purely, I suppose, business-like kind of market level, is that it creates uncertainty. Because if you act now and you don't know whether or not your actions might in the future have become deleterious or been something which you weren't supposed to have done or expended energy on, then you can't have action because you'll be paralyzed by that, right? It's a huge problem. And in this case, what you might notice what's really wrong is that National has come out and said, well, it might have been ACT who said, oh, we're giving more certainty and clarity in an unclear law. And the thing is, this does the exact opposite. These agreements were hammered out. This was the compromise position between the government and other stakeholders in order to try to understand, these are what the principles are. This is how we're going to move on. This is how these agreements are going to work, and understand it so that everybody could understand it. And doing it so fast within this series of hours, right? And with retrospective effect for negotiations which were already going through is such an uncertain thing, and it's such an egregious violation of constitutional norms that it almost wouldn't make sense for Labour to do standard lawmaking in its first 100 days next time, or for the Greens, or any other party, which I don't know, magically pops up out of the ether or whatever. I don't have a crystal ball. But it is curious to see that there has been some comment from the same constitutional lawyers, but this is so much more egregious than what the proposal for Three Waters was going to do. And National has just gone and done this. That I'm shocked that we aren't seeing a huge uproar about this. I mean, I'm not shocked because they know what side their bread is buttered on, but it's rather curious. And I think that really does show what it means for us to have a kind of academic establishment that provides an intellectual cover for the agenda-setting press and how that operates. There's something really telling about the way that this is all played out. And in the substantive component, setting aside the legal component of it, something that Stephanie talked about the detail of, but I want to zoom out a little bit, is the reason why we are not doing what, Broke Van Velden is calling, like for like or whatever the hell. It's like, because the whole of like the gender economics kind of analysis of the latter half of the 20th century is that women's work is seen as devalued and paid less. Things that are perceived to be feminine industries are worth less. That is the entire point of this, right? And it is really worth, I think, us recalibrating in general and using this as a conversation to talk about what we value in general in society. Because oftentimes you'll find, and I think we can draw back to the early part of the pandemic and people want to memory hole this, but the essential workers weren't the CEOs, right? Like they could go home and wait until people started setting up Zooms. It was other people who were doing shit work who were paid very little who were the essential workers for running our society. You don't have sanitation in a city for a couple of weeks and everything goes to shit, literally. So it's really worth just kind of us using this as a way to springboard into broader conversations about economic justice and about what it is that we really incentivize. Like, what does the notion of a market running your society actually mean when there are certain people, very few select people at the commanding heights of the economy who determine what it is that shapes the market itself, right? And these are things that we can talk about, and I think that we ought to.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thanks so much, Simone. I did want to get to the legal procedural aspects of it, and despite my evolution away from relying too much on the idea of kind of procedural dicta, I suppose you might say, I am still a nerd for the retrospective legislation thing. I do think that's like egregiously damaging to a society, and one thing that I think you deserve as a citizen of a society is to know whether what you're about to do is legal or not if you cared, right? I do think that's important. And the entire concept of retrospective legislation really kind of throws mud in the face of that as a concept. So I think that that can't really be underscored enough. That like if you want to live in a society governed by laws, you should probably know what those laws are.
Mhm.
And the idea that people can say, actually, you were wrong to think that is really insulting and should be taken as incredibly serious breach of our pretty fundamental kind of civil rights to live together.
I think I have seen some of the constitutional law nerds coming out and saying that this is bad, and God knows Labour is absolutely outraged about it, which is good to see. And I wonder if some of it is just coming down to that baseline set of norms that we have, which is this is what national governments do. They pass shit under urgency that no one asked them to do, especially if they can say it was ACT Party policy. And Labour and the Greens shouldn't do that because you're meant to be better than that. You're meant to be the mature, sensible ones, which conveniently disempowers you in some ways. And I would again say that this is why I think this is such an opportunity for the left to put some really clear, unambiguous policies on the table going into the election so that then, yeah, in your first 100 days, you just go into urgency and every single thing you pass is something you can say that was in our manifesto. We campaigned on this. We campaigned on reinstating tax cuts on landlords and instituting a wealth tax in order to push through significant pay increases for these industries that we know have paid less because they are women dominated or care focused industries. So, I mean, I just really, really hope we can do that, guys, because that would just be so great if we could, lefties, please, please. I also just wanted to be the most millennial lefty podcaster and recommend a book. Speaking to Simone's point about how these industries are female dominated or encoded as women's work and how we devalue that for a really satisfying read, but in that way that it makes you angry because it's so true. I cannot recommend highly enough Who Cooked Adam Smith's Dinner by Katrine Marsal. It is so sarcastic, but it is basically here is how every bit of our current economic framework is based around the erasure of care work done by women. And by not counting that, the math of our current economic system does not work if you take into account the domestic labor predominantly done by women. And I've been mad about that book since I read it. It's so good. So cannot recommend that enough for people to just understand how systemic and ingrained and enduring this problem is. And I think speaking to a point you made earlier, Philip, seen the number of shitty comments on TikTok from men with the most mediocre avatars you've ever seen in your life, saying things like, why don't these women just retrain? Why don't they just move into different industries? And to all of those guys, I say, why aren't you billionaires? Why didn't you just choose to found a tech company that made you a billionaire? Why didn't you just retrain into an industry that pays you better so you'd have more life satisfaction, wouldn't be trolling frickin' Labour Party TikTok videos, you sad, sad people. But yeah, it's just this is systemic stuff. And that's to go back to a point I made earlier. That's why it was going to cost a lot of money, because rebalancing the scales which have been balanced against particular groups in our society forever is going to take time and money. And the benefits are just so huge that I think we just push ahead and do it as soon as we can.
That's fantastic. Look, I said I had a another provocative question. Here's my second and hopefully last provocative question because we have maybe 10 minutes at the most.
Is this one also more of a statement than a question?
It's more of a statement than a question.
Series of comments.
But look, after the Treaty Principles Bill was brought up, I was unpopularly of the opinion that this could backlash so hard that it would actually be better for the radical left than the centre right. And I sort of feel the same now because this has opened up a can of worms about Marxist feminist economics that I've been trying to open for fucking 15 years, you know? Honestly, if you have someone in your life who you want to radicalize, ask them how much work their mum did when they were a kid and how much she was paid for that, right? That is the most normie way to introduce people to the idea of the imperfection of market transactions and the value of work and all these things, right? And I feel like we have an opportunity to do that at quite a broad scale right now, in the same way as the damage of the Treaty Principles Bill was incredible on an individual level, right? There was an enormous amount of racism unleashed by that. And similarly, hundreds of thousands of people are going to go unpaid based on this. But if you have been fighting from the outside to, shift the dial on what people hear when they hear the value of work, I think this is maybe a once in a generation moment to aggressively push the envelope and say, look, this is what we've been saying, right? Actually, the previous proposal isn't relevant anymore. It's a conversation between does the market determine your value, or, are there unknown unknowns when it comes to the value of what you contribute to society? And I think we're sort of in that position now, right? And the the aperture that we have, I think, to kind of aggressively push forward on a more egalitarian, redistributive, socialist, however you want to frame it, understanding of the economy today is bigger than it was a week ago. So, is it bad that this happened? Yes, of course. But like the opportunities that we're granted by this, I think shouldn't be underestimated. In the same way as, uh, once in history hikoi to government based on toitu te tiriti wouldn't have happened if we hadn't had that attack. The sleepy kind of Pākehā netball mums wouldn't have been radicalized if we hadn't had this moment. So I don't know. Am I being glass half full for a change, Stephanie? What do you think?
Well, one thing I wanted to connect with you talking about the Treaty Principles Bill is a really interesting thing I saw in a number of the signs at these, just amazingly spontaneous and immediately coordinated protests against the Equal Pay Amendment repeal, is the number of signs I saw that were making those connections as well. So I saw one that was just like, te tiriti, trans people, women, who's next? I think it's even more of an opportunity than it would be. Like if they hadn't done the Treaty Principles Bill, I don't think we'd have the same networks. I don't think we'd have the same activism. The fact that over this past January, I was putting out posts every single day, and a lot of people were like, here's what you need to submit on today. Here's the current bill. Here's the current proposal. Here's the next thing you need to put in your 2 cents about. And people were doing it over the sleepiest time of the year for Aotearoa. People are in the zone to resist this shit now. And yeah, if it weren't for the ACT Party overplaying their hand, then, well, not overplaying their hand, playing whatever the fuck they want, and Christopher Luxon letting them do it, I don't think you'd be getting this resistance, because people need to be motivated. It's one of your classic models of organizing: anger, hope, action. So it's really I want to be really optimistic, but I hate being disappointed. So I'm trying to hold myself back a bit. But I think it also speaks to, we can point to the ACT Party's policies and talk about how they're clearly in the pockets of billionaires and motivated by the Atlas Network agenda and all that stuff. But I also think we need to hammer even more, so we sound slightly less like Marxist conspiracy theorists, that they don't care about people. ACT knows that everything it's done is not a vote-winning thing. They knew. David Seymour knows that there is not a silent majority of racists just waiting for someone to smash te tiriti to go voting ACT. They know that they are not going to win any friends cancelling these equal pay amendments, but they will secure the favour of their billionaire patrons, and they will probably still get 8% of the vote, because there is a small enough group of people who are that mean and vicious and right-wing and anti-community and don't care about other people. And that's what they care about. And they can see that they're in a position where National will do nothing to stop them or to moderate them or to say, actually, fuck it, we're going to grand coalition with Labour over the stuff we actually agree with, rather than just letting you punch us in the face on a daily basis. So, God, I'm gonna just keep saying it. We are at a crossroads. We have such an opportunity. This is such an important catalyst for genuine, as you say, shifting of the political dial, not just in a, oh, we can swing some moderate national voters to Labour, but in an actual, we can get people thinking about these ideas. We can get people understanding what these political philosophies and ideologies that we always talk about mean in a real day-to-day material sense without making it jargony and nerdy. Again, comms hat on. We don't need to talk about, we don't even need to say neoliberalism. We just need to say this government is taking money off teachers to give it to landlords. Are you serious, bro? And this government just wants to tear up any agreement it doesn't like, which is another connecting factor between this and the Treaty Principles Bill. We don't need to go at them and say that they're poor fiscal managers and this was the only way they could balance the budget. We need to go at them and say these are untrustworthy people. They will screw you over for $1 because they want $1, not because anyone else actually needed it. So yeah, I just want to know what Christopher Luxon thinks he's getting out of this, right? Because I find it hard to believe that he genuinely is just sitting in his office behind his desk with the flags on either side of him, waiting for David Seymour to come in and say, here's what we're doing today, Chris. But how does he think he's riding this out? How does he think he's surviving this? Like, even if the National Party does, he cannot stick around for that long, surely. But then he is an evangelical, so possibly he's just waiting for rapture. Who can say?
Sorry, every time you talk about neoliberalism, I keep thinking in my head just like Julianne Genter N-word compilation. Like
I'm sorry for stealing that.
3 hours Hansard reel. But it is, I think teachers and landlords is a really great way of framing this because everybody is familiar with school lunches now. So you really can frame it as, the hand that feeds you against the hand that starves you. And National is taking from the hand that feeds you and giving to the hand that starves you. This is what they're doing, right? And you can really frame it in a way that's just so intuitive and easy for people to grasp that way. One nourishes you and your children and raises up the next generation, and the other one is hoarding the housing and the shelter of this country and putting people in cars and leaving them out in the rain, And guess which side National is on? And which side are you on? Right? Which side are you on for this? And I think everybody who isn't, that's very small little bit, they intuitively know.
Philip's nudging us for last comments because we're running out of time, and I am going to lampshade that. Ha 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 ha! I'm a good podcaster. But I'm just going to jump on Simone's last point there and say, yeah, which side are you on? Dropkick Murphys did a hell of a good cover of that. So let's just play that on loop for the next couple of years and smash these guys in the election. Which hopefully Winston does throw a temper tantrum and is sooner than we think.
I want to smash these guys outside the election. I'm going to be real.
Simone, that's not what smash is meant to mean, but you're bringing a level of impropriety to this podcast that's previously entirely unexplored.
Just because my demographic disproportionately, no. That's actually a very transphobic comment, Philip.
No.
You know what's really funny? I was about to call you Kyle out of instinct, and that might be the most insulting thing that I've ever said to you.
I love it. Dial it up, if anything. Yeah, that's fantastic. I do think like if I can inaccurately and insultingly kind of summarize, I guess, a bunch of strands of this conversation, threads and strands, if you will, of this conversation. I guess really there are multiple ways we can respond at this juncture, right? We as both as individuals and organizations and operators and the left in general. And there's a way that I think will probably narratively gain momentum regardless of what we do, which is the this is mean strand. Unfortunately, as Simone said, like I agree that the proceduralists won't be on our side as much as you would hope for something like this, because they sort of know where they sit, even if, these people all vote Green and Labour, right? But they have to, in public, say things like, oh, the impropriety of entrenching rights to water is simply too great to be ignored. Whereas when something that really like tramples on the foundations of our right to life comes up, they go, this is mean. You shouldn't be doing this. And some of them have come out decently well, but it really exposes the the power at the heart of the professional managerial class, I guess, and the which side their bread's buttered on. I agree with that. And then there is a more, I think, radical and generative way that we can come back from this, and that's from saying, look, this is the power dynamic. This is um, now you see the violence inherent in the system, to quote Monty Python. But I think it's true, right? Because we can say, look at who you're hurting, and look how little you give a shit, right? Like the conversation's over, I think, with these people, and it's easy to alienate, let's say, 10% of the population who are the enemy. They're the kind of ACT donors and NAT donors, and then the kind of reactionary, revanchist, hard right, patriarchal core, the, rest in peace, Bob Jones, that section of society. They were never on our side, right? They're the enemy, and that's okay to admit that. We live in New Zealand and we're not comfortable talking about enemies very often, and I think we should be more. And there is like a class antagonism to this that we shouldn't ignore. And I think that's the heart of this conversation. And we can say, look, these are our enemies, and they're advocating for the exact opposite of what we would do because they're our enemies. They're not wrong. They're not stupid. Well, I mean, they are doing it stupidly, but the values at the heart of what they do are damaging to us because they hate us and we hate them in return. And that's good, right? We can form community in that. And together, as Stephanie said, like form a level of hope out of that and a new type of direction together as a community, and move forward with some of the suggestions that Simone said around, making people whole who've been damaged by this insanely revanchist, cruel, disgusting farce of a government. And I think that's okay as of this week to be as radical as that in your pushback, because they've made it that personal, right? And I think because everyone knows someone, this is New Zealand. 2 degrees is a real thing. Everyone knows someone who's going to be damaged by this on a personal, like back pocket level in a really, really hard time. A lot of people are really struggling. People are getting fired. Unemployment's not going down. National's just waiting for the interest rates to decrease. They have no plan beyond that. And I think it's really heartless and beyond that, like calculated to do this much damage to civil society. And I think this gives us an opening. Like this is hopefully will be a radicalizing moment, but radicalization doesn't just happen. Have these conversations, right? Talk to your friends. Say, look, when I've been speaking for years and years and years and years about the imperfections of a free market and the way that these people are remunerated does not correspond to the amount of value that they contribute to society. This is what I mean. And look, we just had, a years long conversation about the value that these people bring, and government cut that off at the knees because they don't give a shit, because they're not on their side, right? They're not on our side. They're on their own side. And they're our enemies, and we need to do something about it. And I do think that could really kind of twist the knife in the gut shot, to mix metaphors. Any final comments, criticisms, Simone?
I do have final comments. I think we have seen, yes, the treaty principles bill. We've seen pay equity just recently. They have a quote unquote review of the Waitangi Tribunal coming down the pipeline. And I don't think they realize that all of these things are the compromise position. If you take away the Waitangi Tribunal, where do you think the energy of Papua New Guinea, which is currently being funneled towards redressing their claims through this agreed compromise forum, is going to go? It'll be the 1970s again, which I don't think is a bad thing. But for many of the liberals and many of nationals people, this is a bad thing for them. So I think that what they don't realize is that those were a compromise. And I guess my last comments are, we should make them wish that they'd stuck with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Can I get a shameless plug in? All right. So this June, I am participating somewhat against my will in Sweat with Pride, which is exercising for 21 minutes every day in June to raise money for Burnett Foundation, Rainbow Youth, Inside Out, and Outline. I have set myself a goal of $1,000, and if I get that, I will do 1,000 burpees over the course of June. So if you would like to participate in raising life-saving funds for Rainbow Kiwis, but also making me suffer, check out Stephanie Rogers on sweatwithpride.com. It's also the pinned post on my Blue Sky.
Also,
Do it for me.
we'll share the
I
link.
I secretly
Sounds-
love burpees. I'm broken in some fundamental way.
Well, that's as a centrist, I think it's good both to hurt people on the left and to fund organizations for pride groups like that. So
Win-win.
as fellow centrists, I think we can all get behind that as a cause. Thank you, everybody. We'll share that link. Stephanie, appreciate it. Thank you for another episode of 1 of 200. That's been me, Stephanie, and Simone talking only about pay equity because that's all we had time for because we all got excited about it as I'd sort of assumed that we would. All right. We'll catch you next week. Thanks, Stephanie.
Kia ora.
Thanks, Simone.
Got it.
Have a great week, everybody. Love you. Bye.
If artifices are denied, living a pointless life, but learning all your lessons. Fucking politics, there's no distinction. The road's apart now. It's paid with good intentions. And I'll admit that I'm at a loss for what to say when they quote this as a cost we ought to stay. Cause I live amongst the people every day. In this vindictive, forgetful fucking rain, it feels like we're